Hello, I'm Carwyn Jones, and welcome to this series of podcasts where I interview the movers and shakers in the Welsh business community. It's a great pleasure to be joined today by William McNamara, the Chief Executive of Bluestone, somewhere you'll all have heard of. William, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
This morning.
Thank you for asking me.
Now, as I said, people have heard of Bluestone. It's a well-known resort, and many people will be familiar with you as the person who drove its construction, its development. But tell us a bit about yourself. Where did it all start? When you were younger, what was your journey in life?
Well, I suppose from primary school, for some obscure reason, I knew that I would never be employed. I would always be an employer and a leader, and I would run my own businesses. I had no idea what they would be. I was born into a farming family, and from a very early age, I was feeding calves and then driving tractors and hauling silage and milking cows and driving the combine, and I assumed that's where my life would take me. So I stayed locally. I went to Milford Haven Grammar School. I didn't have a particularly illustrious academic life. Didn't do very well in my O-levels, so my father was rather horrified and sent me away immediately to a private school, which was a big wake-up call for me. I'd always been a homeboy, always been on the farm, so I had to retake some O-levels, start 3 A-levels with a different curriculum the other side of the Severn Bridge, and that was interestingly a very hard time for me, but 2 of the happiest years of my life. And it was really when I found myself. I did go off to agricultural college thereafter and assumed that I would have a life in farming. I was milking cows. I built a big new herd on Newton Farm, which is the Narberth farm. Imposition of milk quotas in 1986 was a huge blow to me and my family, and my desire to build a little business, a farming business. So I decided I had to do something else. So I sat down and thought hard for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then decided to build a theme park, which was Oakwood.
It was Oakwood, of course.
And
that's right.
Oakwood was a wonderful journey for me, a great learning curve in hospitality. Farming is a great life, but it's quite an insular life. And so I remember the weekend that Oakwood opened, and I had never seen so many people in my entire life. We had 200 people came in the first day, and we lost more money. 1,500 people came in the second day, and 3,000 people came in on day 3. So that was really my baptism of fire into hospitality. And it was a fabulous time. The business was a success from day one, and we built it. I thought that we would have crossed the big risk area when we opened, because I'd borrowed over £1 million to do it, which back in those days was a lot of money. And I have to thank my father, because I went to him when he was 65 and said, "Can I use the collateral of your entire life's work to create this new business?" And bless his heart, he said yes, as long as we were sort of together and we went into it together with our eyes open, which we did.
But when you say we?
Well, it was a family. There were other members of the family. We were, a good little family business to start with. Tensions grew, and anyway, we created what was Wales's biggest tourist attraction within 5 or 6 years, with virtually 500,000 visitors a year. And it was just a great, great time. But I could see storm clouds on the horizon. I knew that we had to either create a destination resort or run it for cash, basically. I didn't want to do the latter, and the rest of my family didn't want to do the former. So I said, okay, give me my shareholding, and I came back across the hedge, because this was in the southern half of my dairy farm, and I decided to build a resort in the northern half of my dairy farm.
So you built Oakwood as a very successful business, been there for a long time, of course. I remember conducting negotiations with Merco, would you believe, while I was in Oakwood, with my kids, at the time when the Merco went. Yes. Unfortunately, of course, the refinery closed down. But I remember I had to get to sit in the office to take a phone call from their CEO, bizarrely. So that's the contribution that Oakwood made to trying to save Merco. But you wanted to look at something else. And at that point in time, you were obviously part of a very successful business. What sort of result were you looking for? What did you have in mind at that point?
Well, first and foremost, Pembrokeshire is a seasonal county. And everybody, when I created the business plan to do it, everybody said, you're mad because it closes down in the winter and you can't make it work. I wanted to create something that was environmentally sustainable. I wanted to create something that was luxury, that was 5-star, that would run all year round, and absolutely would employ local people, have a local supply chain, and would sell basically a flavour of Wales. And that's what I set out to do, and 10, 11 years down the road, I think we've delivered.
And of course, you when you put forward the proposals, part of the land was a national park, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
I remember being involved with that myself personally, but there we are. No, that, and yes.
Yeah, we had a very, very difficult journey. There's not enough belief in Wales. There's not enough belief in what can be achieved. There's usually an approach of why we can't do these things. And we had a very, very tough time, and then there was a very cynical use of judicial review process, because although we got planning consent, we were then taken to the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and right up to the House of Lords, which I was within weeks of being personally bankrupted on that. It was a delaying tactic. But in the end, we won, we came through, we got planning consent. We lost 2 years while we were doing that, which was very significant because then, of course, we had a 2-year build, but we opened into the jaws of the biggest economic downturn in living memory. So we then went into lockdown for about 5 years, and it was a very, very tough time indeed.
No, I remember because I remember my family and I were one of your first customers actually, together with a few other families. And I remember at the time it was people said, "Oh well, it's look." It's just open. It's a difficult time, and will it last? And sure enough, it has. And I think the most inspirational part of the development was creating that pool complex, because it's year round, and it was so different. And for a family with young kids, it was magical for them.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the turning point for me personally between 2008 onwards was 2012, and that was the first year that financially we broke even. It wasn't much of a bit of a Pyrrhic victory, but in fact we were then on the road to survival. The pool, Blue Lagoon, was opened on day one. We had a few problems with that from the build, which was unfortunate. But we have subsequently come on from there. We've invested in more accommodation, and of course this last year, in 2019, we opened Serendome, which is our latest £9 million addition. One of the issues in West Wales is very occasionally it rains, and often when it does rain, it doesn't rain from above, it comes in horizontally. So we decided to build the biggest umbrella there was in the UK and put it over a load of activities, and we've done it. It was a world first. It's a fascinating new structure. That we have 5,000 plants in there and 200 trees and climbing frames and children's play areas and water play and a food court and a theatre. And that has really weatherproofed our business. We are open year round. We have fantastic Christmas products. We're now into winter lights, and then we go into the seasonal aspects of the business. And we deliver regularly 96% occupancy of every lodge every day of the year.
I can imagine it's, and of course there's a wide variety of different accommodation there. There's that village square effectively in the middle, isn't there? Which you've and the old church which you kept, of course, the old ruined church.
The church, we are mandated to do it up, and it's 800 years old, and we are actually on it now, and. We have a pipeline of over £20 million of reinvestment, not including Serendome. This is from now onwards. We're building more lodges. We're doing the church. We're representing restaurants and activities. It's the business is now in a fabulous place, and we've had over 1 million staying visitors, and we have about 170,000 staying guests a year. That will go up to over 200,000 when we open our new Premier Lodges in 2022. but it's an incessant, it's voracious in terms of its reinvestment. So a very good relationship with Barclays in Cardiff, and if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't really be doing this, but they look after us and we look after them, and things are going well.
And a traffic-free environment as well.
Yes, it's
mainly
car traffic free. Yeah. We have golf buggies, we have a land train, we have bicycles for hire, and guests bring their own bikes. And that is very special because a lot of kids and families are literally not prepared to let their children out onto the roads. But here we see them on their little scooters and bikes, and it's just great to let people relax and enjoy the surroundings because, as you said, it is in a national park. It's beautiful countryside. We have over 200 acres of woodland, all part of Bluestone, with lots of footpaths and streams and bridges. So it's a great, great place to suck in the beautiful Pembrokeshire air, look at the dark skies, and just enjoy the product.
I can't believe it. Is it 12 years, you said, it's been open? This year?
2008.
Yeah, 12 years this year.
Yes,
Yeah, so it's and it's endured, and you've proven all wrong. I mean, in terms of the way it's worked in Bluestone, have you ever thought of exporting the model to another site anywhere?
Yes. Some people may know we've been looking very carefully at a site in North Wales because, and that's on Holy Island, just 2 miles southeast of Holyhead Port. Yes. Fascinating place, beautiful site with outline planning consent. And what's interesting there is that it doesn't really cannibalize our current market because Bluestone market is South Wales, over the Severn Bridge M4 corridor, inside the M25 a bit and down into the southeast and the southwest. But of course, the North Wales site would take you up into Manchester, Sheffield, up the west coast. And there's a very, nearly 20 million people within 2 to 3 hours, as opposed to 3 million within a couple of hours of Bluestone, Pembrokeshire. So a very different site, very flat and coastal, very exciting. The problem is with these projects is the huge upfront cost, approximately 160, 180 million pounds. So we're looking at different ways that we can fund that. But my ultimate ambition for the security of the brand, the people that work there, is to find a mechanism that we can build 4 in the UK. 2 in Wales, 1 in Scotland, and probably 1 down in the West Country. So that's my ultimate ambition. Whether we'll get there, whether we'll get there alone or in a joint venture with somebody. But I think that would be the right thing to do, as I've said, for the brand, for the people that work there. That's the security it needs. We're a little bit vulnerable down in Western Wales as a one-off, and I'm not ready to retire, but I've got half a dozen years left, probably in full-time employment, and I need to leave it in the knowledge that it's safe and secure for the next 40 years.
Are you still involved in farming at all?
No, sadly. I was
going to ask you, do you miss it? And there's the answer, sadly.
Yes, in a way. My life revolves sitting at a desk and doing emails and talking to people and going on the resort. And everything I do is done through everybody else. And so what I miss really is, I used to go out and plough a field or milk the cows, and there was always something to show for it at the end that was fairly basic in some respects, but you actually could look at that and say, I did that. So now, as I said, everything's through everybody else. That's the job I do. That's the business I'm in. But what I have managed to do is to keep my feet firmly on the ground, and I think that's very important. I have a big garden with a bit of woodland and a paddock, so I'm always still out there fencing and logging and doing something. So that's what keeps me, I hope, with a level of sanity anyway.
So when you were farming, what did you have, Friesians, Holsteins?
Yeah, we Friesians, yes, and we grew all our own followers, and we had mixed arable as well.
And you miss milking twice a day?
No.
It's a tough life, isn't it?
It
was a way of life rather than a job, milking.
It is, and people don't realise that it's tough and the margins were tight. And I'll tell you an interesting story. I was milking 180 cows, which was a big herd in the late 80s. And I created Oakwood, and in the first season, we had an ice cream outlet where we bought ice cream actually from a friend of mine who started his business the same time as I did, and he was a bigger and better farmer than I was, Dick Francis of Upton Farm, and he created Upton Farm ice cream. So I said, well, I'm going to build a theme park and I'll sell your ice cream, which we did, and we bought it in 4-litre tubs, and I paid a lad to scoop it and put it in cornets, and between May and October, that made more profit than milking 180-odd cows for 365 days. And although that was a huge success for me and Oakwood, I felt very hurt and actually bad for the industry, because the margins are just too tight for the effort and the involvement that goes into it.
And the price goes up and down like a
Oh,
euros. I mean,
you've
ever
got
since the
no
milk marketing
security.
board went,
Yeah,
it all became
exactly.
very,
Yeah. Well, that was all
insecure.
after my days, but getting up at 10 to 5 in February was not really my first choice. When you got up in May and you were getting the cows in, and it was a beautiful time of the day and the birds are all singing, you think, yeah, I'm glad I did get up. But there's still long days and it was tough, and a lot of it was quite monotonous as well. So, although I miss it, I'm glad I've gone down another road.
Yeah. And the McNamara name suggests an Irish link.
Yes, County Clare originally, and very interesting. We've sort of traced the ancestry. My ancestors were master builders, ironically, built Bunratty Castle, and then migrated off to Europe anti-clockwise from County Clare, and then ended up. My grandfather, his middle name was Belkingar, which was Dutch. He came then, so they went full circle. He came back into Rickmansworth, where he built houses, beautiful houses. They're known as McNamara houses, Loudwater Estate. And then after the war, they really struggled to move the business on because there were no materials. They couldn't get the business back. So my dad, with no farming expertise or history, just came to Pembrokeshire and bought Roos Ferry Farm, where we were all brought up. And so we'd almost come full circle. There's one more step back to County Clare.
That's quite an undertaking to come into farming with no experience.
Oh, he was extraordinary. My dad, he was an inveterate inventor and fixer. And so, and my grandpa was obviously part of it as well. So they built the farm from scratch with a lot of them Ministry of Defence buildings that they dismantled.
So was it a farm before? Or?
Well, it was, but there was land there, but there were no farm buildings, no milking parlour, no hay barns, no workshop. There was a workshop there, that was the only thing. There wasn't even a house there. So they built all of that themselves and farmed at the same time, and brought up us kids. So they were great people. I miss them both.
And the future. I mean, you've already mentioned some of the plans for expanding the Bluestone brand. If I could ask you, I suppose, two questions in particular. There you are, a lad from a farm. You've come. The journey that you've taken has been very different from when you started. What next for William McNamara?
Well, in order to go into the future, I think fundamentally, I've always wondered and then looked carefully at what the future's going to look like. And I did it in Oakwood. That's why I came out of Oakwood, and I've always studied it through Bluestone. And I think we're obviously, all periods are interesting periods, but we've now got Generation Alpha, who are the children of the millennials, and they're a very interesting bunch of animals. They're very different. They are very technologically savvy. They are well educated, and apparently they're going to be very wealthy. So we're told globally this is. Now, time will tell. But from a technology point of view, most of them would rather have a tablet than a puppy. And I think that says a lot. And it's a big issue for me. I have grandchildren now, so I see it on a personal basis. But from a business basis, I'm really interested to develop Bluestone so that it is a place where you can come reconnect with nature, have some exercise, reconnect from a communication point of view, talk to your family instead of texting them, sitting around a table, sitting in a restaurant, sitting having a picnic, looking at what nature has to offer, the simple things in life, being concerned about the environment. So from my point of view, I want to continue to develop the Bluestone product along with developing our people. You know, we employ 700 people down in Pembrokeshire. They're all local people, all live within probably 20 miles. One of my greatest pleasures is seeing people progress through our business. In 2019, over 80 people were promoted within the business, and most of the senior management is all homegrown. So I love to see them really progressing. People is my passion, you know, whether they're our staff or our guests. So I want to create and see that Bluestone is going in the right direction from what the future holds. For me personally, well, I'm worried about giving up work. I don't want to do that. It's my problem is I enjoy going to work every day. So I get a few family tensions about why don't you take a bit more time off.
Yes.
So I do take time off.
That's the farmer in you, though. You know, I've come across so many people over the years, you know, young farmers who were just waiting for their fathers to retire so they can take over the farm.
Yeah, well, I'm very conscious of that, and so I have a rule at Bluestone: don't do yourself what you can cost effectively pay someone else to do. So I'm very good at delegation. I like to challenge what people want to do in our business, but I don't. I'm not sitting there clinging on by my fingernails. In some respects, I'm still waiting for someone to say, move over, William, we don't really need you anymore. I have a strategic role now. Certainly operationally, they've said that and done that, because I'm not involved in the day-to-day operation of the business. I still go around the resort once a week and have a good look and see what's going on and write things in my notebook and get them followed up. But we have a great team who run the business, and I'm very happy for them to do so.
Yeah, from what you're saying, you seem very happy with the succession planning is the phrase, isn't it?
Yes.
That you've got the right people in place to carry on.
It is important. You know, Bluestone as a founder, CEO in it, and when I hang my boots up, then that is quite a big hole to fill. And when you found a business, startups, people don't realize how difficult and challenging startups are. Luckily, they won't have to do another startup as such, even if we replicate the product somewhere else, possibly even after my time. That's not a startup. That's just a pick up what we do well and put it somewhere else. So the startup period of the business is done and dusted. And a startup actually lasts about 5-6 years. It doesn't happen in click of a finger. So that's now done. What we need to do is to put very capable operators in the right positions in the business who are always looking over their shoulder as well as looking ahead and seeing that the business stays. It's very fit and healthy at the moment. It's doing very well. It's growing annually. And it's a very exciting business to be part of.
Final question from me, and it's a question I ask all my guests on the podcast. If I was to ask you this question, what would you want Wales to look like in 10 years' time? What do you think we need to be doing?
Starting off with the people of Wales, we need more belief in ourselves. I passionately believe in Wales. I believe in where I live in West Wales, and I believe in the Welsh people. But I'm not sure we all believe in ourselves as much as we should do. So I want a more confident Wales. That's something that's very important to me, because we are as good as anyone else. Geographically, we have some challenges, but overall, we're a great, great nation. I would love to see more partnerships, more collaboration. You know, I'm very frustrated. I know I go on about the planning process, but notwithstanding the planning process, the culture between the private sector and the public sector is difficult to bridge. You know, where we operate, we live in a jungle. We're in survival mode most of the time because you never know what's round the next tree, so to speak, or hanging from a branch. So we have to live by our wits. Things have to happen quickly. We have to take risks. And that, in the main, is very different to the public sector. We have a culture, a written culture in Bluestone, and part of it says that we have a can-do attitude. A lot of the public sector has what I would call a why can't attitude. And there's all sorts of reasons why we can't do things. We don't really partner. We don't work together. We talk about doing things together. But we need to just link arms now and again and say, do you know what? Yeah, there's a bit of risk here, but if we're all focused and we're all determined to make it happen, we will. Because you can make tough things happen if you have the right mindset.
That's true, and I think you're right. There is a tendency in the public sector to be a little bit more risk averse. But then what I always say to people is that being First Minister is like being the chief exec of a PLC. And every week you're asked questions by shareholders who happen to be full-time shareholders with staff. And inevitably, some things will go wrong. But as long as you can justify why you supported something that didn't work out, then that should be fine. We took Aston Martin was a punt for us to begin with, and they're in Wales. Cardiff Airport was the same. That would have closed. Yes. No question about that. Yes. And sometimes you do have to. Well, you can't support something that's going to fail, and obviously it's going to fail. But if you can see something, and you know you're going to get flack over it, you have to go for it. And I think there is that tendency sometimes to think, well, hang on, if this goes wrong, the flack is going to be terrible and all the rest of it. But yeah, I want to take your point in terms of there is a difference of approach. I think it's getting better.
Do you?
Yeah, the younger ones are pretty. I mean, the younger civil service particularly, they're very, very dynamic. And
well, I'm delighted to hear that because
there's some good people there.
Listen, I couldn't operate in politics, and I admire you for what you've done.
I'm recovering,
so I'm not criticising as such. I'm just saddened and frustrated at the lost opportunities because there are so many things that could happen in Wales, and they will. But we must remain positive and not feel sorry for ourselves and dust ourselves off when we have issues and make good things happen.
We have to avoid living in a perpetual R.S. Thomas poem, worrying the carcass of an old song and looking in ourselves. I couldn't agree more with that. William, it's been a great pleasure having you on. As I said, lots of people will have heard of you. They will know, of course, about Oakwood and, of course, about Bluestone, but we've learned a lot today about your personal journey to where you ended up, and the bumpy road that is always travelled whenever you set up something very, very new. And sometimes that natural scepticism that people in Wales have, well, that's never going to succeed. And sure enough, you have succeeded.
We made it happen. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and the best of luck in the future.
Thank you.